when they get lost, it's easy to say, well, Gary led them that way. But with Jack driving the car and being really particular about getting from point A to point B, I don't think he would have listened to Gary. And the night they went missing is February 24th. They went to a college basketball game, and the next day they had a big Special Olympics tournament. So for these guys to go on some joyride or to get their, trip back home messed up, with unnecessary stops here and there, they wouldn't have had it. They wanted to be home. They wanted to get at least some sleep before the big event in the morning and go on. And, if they won the tournament, they'd go to LA to be in the main state Special Olympics tournament down at UCLA, and they get Disneyland tickets. So there's like a lot of like important things happening in their life. And, joyriding into the Plumas wasn't one of them.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome back to the Another Nobody Show with me, your favorite nobody, Travis Myers. Today, we're going to be talking about the Yuba County Five with the man who wrote the book, Things Aren't Right by Tony Wright. All right? And Tony Wright is the leading authority on the Yuba County Five case, who many of you true crime fans know is one of the just craziest, most bizarre mysteries going. But that's enough for me. Let's hear from the man himself, Mr. Tony Wright. All right, here we go. How you doing, Tony? So good to see you again, my friend. It's been what? CrimeCon was the last time I saw you, right?
Yeah, we were in Nashville, and that was May of last year. So close.
Yeah, I gave a little introduction to everybody, but I'm going to reintroduce you now. Tony Wright, the author of Things Aren't Right, the official Bible, if you will, of the Yuba County Five. Did I kind of give you a good intro there?
Yeah, I like it. I appreciate it. So thank you very much. I'm glad that glad you reached out again, because it was cool hearing from you, because I was reading your book, Sister Margaret, and I see
very, very
someone's
good, yes.
like, hey, do you know this guy? And I saw the name Travis. I'm like, well, I know a few people named Travis. And I saw the book. I'm like, yeah, I remember Travis and his sister. Met him at CrimeCon. So it's a small world.
That's right. Well, actually, it was my sister Natasha that turned me on to you. Not you, but the Yuba County Five story. She lives in California, in Salinas, and she was very familiar with it. She's been out there for over 30 years, and was like, oh, I'm so excited to read this. And of course she did, and then passed it on to me. And we got this thing going on here. So here we are. Before we get started with the story and everything that everybody wants to know, tell us a little bit about you, though. What dragged you into this case and made you decide to write this book?
Well, I'm Tony Wright. I'm an archivist, and I work in local government. So I work at a records management and archives facility. I've been helping people research books and do research on different types of projects since probably 2000. So that involves helping like local historians, but we also do work with like the police and attorneys, and, we do a little bit of everything. And when I started my job at the city of Grand Rapids, Michigan, I decided to take on listening to some true crime podcasts and watch some true crime content on YouTube, and thought, hey, I've been missing out on some of this stuff. I'm kind of behind, because this was around like 2014. So I'd start listening to podcasts, check out original content on YouTube from time to time. By 2018, I found this case called the Yuba County Five. And when I first heard the story, it was on a YouTube channel called Criminally Listed. It's based out of Canada. And it was the 100th episode, so it was called The Viewer's Choice. And every week, Criminally Listed has these episodes that are like different topics, crimes that were committed where, there's these mysterious voicemail clues left over, or unsolved cold cases in New England, things like that. And so I was a huge fan. When I saw the 100th episode, the last story was titled Gary, Matthias, and the Boys. And I'm watching the video, and I thought, man, I know this story, right? Because I'm an 80s kid. I was watching Unsolved Mysteries and what was that show with Leonard Nimoy about the unexplained, but In Search of.
can't remember the name of it, but I remember the show. Yes.
In Search of or something like that.
I
And
think you're right.
I was like, man, this is an interesting case. I've heard about this, right? And I did some thinking and I'm like, no, I don't know anything about this case. So I decided, you know what? Maybe there's a book on Amazon or something at the library where I can read up on this case and learn a little bit more. And there was nothing available at the time. So around 2019, I talked to a friend of mine because I was doing work in the comic book industry with an independent publisher. We were at a convention in Miami, and it was a great convention for us. We're having a great time. We're selling a lot of books. And the guy sitting next to me, he was publishing a lot on the book side. So we would have like books of fiction instead, well, along with comic books and graphic novels. I said, hey, have you ever published anything in true crime? He's like, no, but I can give you my 2 cents on it, because he was going into like criminal psychology and stuff like that. And we talked about this case. He's like, yeah, write a book, go for it. And so I thought, well, it's 2019. I got to finish up on a comic book, but 2020 seems like a year where I got nothing on the schedule, and let's see what happens. And 2020 happens. My life got turned upside down and the world got turned upside down. And but I started researching the book in 2020. And by the end of 2023, the book was completed. Had it with a publisher, Genius Book Publishing, which is out of Milwaukee. And the book was released January of last year. And then April of last year, Files of the Unexplained dropped on Netflix, which talks about the Yuba County 5 case in one episode. I was interviewed along with some family members, and here we are. I mean, the Yuba County 5 story has been huge since 2018. People still talk about it. It's probably one of the biggest cases that is discussed on social media, because you always hear like D.B. Cooper and the Zodiac or Son of Sam, stuff like that. And yeah, there's definitely a big community out there for those types of stories, but Yuba County 5, man, that is moving, and it's got a worldwide audience.
Well, it's almost, if the fact that it's still such a mystery, between your book and everything that I've read, watched, looked into, there's just nothing about it makes sense. And it's something that, like a horror movie would be written about. I mean, you could simply drop something supernatural in here to explain it. But other than that, there's no explanation, and it's so bizarre to me. And of course, we're going to get into that, but please go ahead.
Yeah, that's the thing about the case that gets people's attention is you have 5 people who disappear driving home, and they take this U-turn into the Plymouth National Forest. They become hopelessly lost. They leave their car. They go into the wilderness. It's the middle of winter, snow, freezing temperatures, no shelter. They walk 12 miles. No one can find them. And it's this heartbreaking, bizarre story. And to this day, there's really no explanation of why they went that way. But because 4 of the men had intellectual disabilities, one person was diagnosed with schizophrenia, it's easy to say, oh, well, there's your problem. And then you have to go, okay, you can have that on the surface, but once you sort of dig deep into the case and talk to the families and see what's going on, they'll tell you, like, these guys traveled out of town together before many times. And just because they had disabilities or had a mental illness doesn't mean you can't be productive in life and you can't get from point A to point B. So,
well, I think that's one of the main points that makes it so interesting. So yes, all of them had mental problems. 4 of them, though, were just somewhat, and actually fairly mildly, from what I understand, intellectually disabled. And who was it? Gary Mathias was the one who was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and was known to have several violent outbursts and some drug use, but overall was not a criminal. Correct?
No, and I think people, I get what you're saying. Like, people don't understand the difference between someone who's a criminal and someone who's just not together with their life.
Correct. No, he was not a bad person, is what the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, and when you're in schizophrenia and you're not taking medication, you're in trouble, and your life is off the rails, and that doesn't make you a bad person. But once you get your life on track, which he did with the help of his family, he had a part-time job, he was on medication, he's seeing a doctor, all that all those problems with law enforcement went away. And like before they went missing, he had a few run-ins with people, but the people he had run-ins with, they were some tough dudes. So I don't know if he had some unsettled business with these guys, because where they lived in Marysville, California, and Yuba City, California, there were some wild dudes out that way.
Yes.
And for a community that small, I mean, there was no shortage of what they like to call bad actors. So,
Right.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, people just hear Gary has schizophrenia and they're like, oh, well, he's crazy. And that's
Well,
like, well, you don't understand.
or for the other four also who, were mentally disabled or mentally challenged, whatever the right word is. But these were all functioning guys. They all had jobs. Jack Madruga, I know for a fact, he had the car, he drove the car, he cherished the car, took very good care of it. They'd all taken numerous trips together. They were good friends, right? They all got along really well. So much so that all their family members and everybody in the neighborhood known them as the boys. They were the boys, who were these guys who all belonged to, what was the name of the group?
It was called the Gateway Projects,
Yeah.
and it was just a nonprofit that gave people job training and sort of like life coaching, people with disabilities, people with mental illness. It was just a way of saying, hey, you can get a job and you can live independently, and we're going to show you how to like get the job skills and, get the life coaching. And their program had a basketball team that was linked to the Special Olympics. They were called the Gateway Gators.
Yep.
And, they were Special Olympics athletes. So they had the experience being in the Special Olympics. So all the guys love basketball, they love sports, and they enjoyed life. So you're right. They didn't get lost. They would travel to Sacramento, which is about 40 minutes south of where they lived, and they've been to Chico before. So they knew how to go out and have a good time.
Also,
and when they
two
got
of
lost,
them,
it's weird.
geez, and I don't want to get it wrong. I know Gary Mathias was one. One of the other fellas also did have some military experience, right? Weren't both of them in the Army for a short time? They ended up not making it through their enlistment, but both were in the Army for a short bit, were they not?
Yes, Gary Mathias and Jack Madruga. So they both served in the Army. They had experience. They
made it
went
through basic training.
Yeah, they made it through basic.
Yes.
And and from there, Gary went to West Germany when it was West Germany, when it was split in two. I mean, that makes us that old.
Yes.
And then Jack was actually sent to Vietnam for a little bit, but I don't know how long. But then he was kind of doing work in the Bay Area. I want to say somewhere around Oakland. They may have had like a military installation where he was driving trucks, and then he was put on like reserve for a while, but I don't think he was ever called back up. So yeah, they had the military experience. And then Jackie Hewitt went hunting with his family and went fishing with his family. So he had some outdoor experience. And then Bill, not much of an outdoor guy, but kind of knew the area up there where they would get lost. And Gary, just good at, Gary, he was a good athlete. Ted, who we haven't really talked about yet, not much of an outdoor guy, but just enjoyed life and was a good friend to all the others.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that struck me too, is from everything that I've looked into, just how well they all got along and how well they were loved by their families, and it seemed by the surrounding community. I didn't find anything negative about these kids. And, I say kids, again, they were what, 24 to 32? Is that the age range between them?
Yeah. And Ted was the oldest at 32. Jackie was the youngest at 24. So, and they had known each other probably, 8 to 10 years. So they were all familiar with each other. So there's no strangers within the group.
Well, that's what I mean. They when there are naysayers who are blaming, or possibly their theories point towards one of them, I've never bought that at all.
Yeah. And when they get lost, it's easy to say, well, Gary led them that way. But with Jack driving the car and being really particular about getting from point A to point B, I don't think he would have listened to Gary. And the night they went missing is February 24th. They went to a college basketball game, and the next day they had a big Special Olympics tournament. So for these guys to go on some joyride or to get their trip back home messed up, with unnecessary stops here and there, they wouldn't have had it. They wanted to be home. They wanted to get at least some sleep before the big event in the morning, and go on. And, if they won the tournament, they'd go to LA to be in the main state Special Olympics tournament down at UCLA, and they get Disneyland tickets. So there's like a lot of like important things happening in their life. And, joyriding into the Plumas wasn't one of them. So, and I don't buy Gary taking them on some crazy trip to Valhalla or whatever they said.
I never bought that either. And then knowing from what I've read, I don't know any of this personally, but they had their uniforms, or a few of them had their uniforms laid out. They were ready. They were so excited to go to this basketball tournament that they had lined up. Why don't you take us through that? From obviously we've just kind of basically been introduced to the boys, but kind of take us up and into, the basketball game and what transpired after that to lead them on this ridiculous trip that they made up into the mountains.
Yeah, so the five are Ted Weir, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, Jackie Hewitt, and Gary Mathias. So they all lived in the Marysville, Yuba City area, which is north of Sacramento. So they're south of the Plumas. They're not up in the foothills of Sierra Nevada, but it's close to them. And on February 24th, their favorite basketball team is UC Davis, and they had an away game at Chico State. UC Davis was doing all right. When you get to the end of like February, you start getting into like March Madness and stuff like that. And UC Davis was a Division II team that was looking good, and they were going to win their conference and they could go into the playoffs. And the guys were like, this is going to be awesome. And Chico State wasn't having a good year. They probably won like 2 or 3 games up to that point. It was a rough season for them. So the guys probably thought like, oh, this is going to be a blowout. We're going to get a good game in Friday night. Saturday, we'll go down to Sacramento for our basketball tournament. And when we win that, we'll be set for the summer because we're going to go to UCLA for the big tournament. So 6 p.m. on the 24th, they leave the Yuba City, Marysville area. So they all get into Jack Madruga's car, which was a 2-door 1969 Mercury Montego. Jack had always been the driver for the guys. He was a responsible guy. He took them north up to Chico. They're at the basketball game because there's a witness who sees them. They watch the game. UC Davis wins. They leave the arena. They walk or probably drive to a convenience store that's not far from campus. They buy like pop, milk, like those Hostess pies or Langendorf pies, like candy bars, chips, just a bunch of junk food. They get back in the car, and all they had to do was get back on Highway 99. And south of Chico, the highway splits. There's 99, which is a state highway, and 70 is a state highway. 99 leads you south right into Yuba City, and 70 leads you south right into Marysville. So Jack Madruga had one of 2 highways to take home, and it wasn't hard. I mean, it's a straight shot. But what happens is, as they're driving south, they exit into a town called Oroville. Once they're in Oroville, they get on a road called the Oroville-Quincy Highway, which instead of driving south, they're heading east. Now they go northeast up into the Plumas National Forest. I mean, they cross a big bridge over a reservoir called the Bidwell Bar Bridge over Lake Oroville. They get into the Plumas National Forest. It, goes up in elevation to about 4,000, 5,000 feet. And when you make that drive, it's obvious you're not in Marysville area. The roads wind. You begin to see the foothills. There's pine trees. And for them, the temperatures drop. Your ears are probably going to pop heading up that way. And you'll see snow, which they didn't see unless they were up in the Plumas.
There's, not to interrupt you, but there's a couple of things that strike me about that immediately. And again, I've never been in this area, but for the most part, for what I understand, not only are you always on the highway, if they had come back the same way that they went, they would have been on the highway. It would have been fairly flat and level, correct? And there wouldn't be a big giant bridge. So there's no way that they think they're going in the right direction.
Right.
And again, with these guys too, let me ask you this. Now, we've mentioned a couple of times that they were mentally disabled. Do we think, though, that they were necessarily low IQ individuals, or more of an autistic thing where they were still very intelligent? Obviously, being able to make it through the Army, you're not a dummy, you know? So it could have been, back in the day, in the 70s, autism wasn't what it is today. And they could have just been thrown into, oh, they're dumb, they're stupid. When in fact, they may not have been particularly low IQ as far as, unintelligent people.
I think with Ted, Jack, Jackie, and Bill, some of their family members are of the opinion, knowing what they know today, that this is definitely considered autism spectrum.
Okay.
They said with Jack, I mean, he could have been socially awkward. He could have maybe more along Asperger's than anything else. But
correct.
They said with Jack, he graduated high school. He was going to like a junior college. He'd been in the Army. They said he was just a little bit slow in his processes, but nothing where it was like, oh, we can't trust this guy. His family trusted him driving his nieces and nephews around. He was not a bad guy. And, Jackie Hewitt, they said he was low IQ, but he could ride a motorcycle. No problem. Riding a motorcycle, I've done it before. It takes a little bit of like hand-eye coordination, and because you got to shift and you got to understand like how that whole mechanics works. It's not like you jump on a motorcycle and you rev the engine and you take off and you hit. It's not like a bicycle with a motor.
Right.
There's shifting involved, and you got to know how to take care of that motorcycle.
Absolutely. And that's I guess my question / point here, and I think you're agreeing with me, is that these guys were not unintelligent people. They didn't do this on accident. Driving the way that they went was not, oh, we made a mistake, because they could have very simply turned around. They knew that they were going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and it's not like you take a wrong turn, you're like, oh, because wherever you live, sometimes you take a wrong turn, you're like, oh, I'm on this road, like,
Yes.
This sucks. So I got to turn around. But when you exit Oroville, you have to drive through that city, and you have to cross the Bidwell Bar Bridge at Lake Oroville, and then you start taking roads that are just like winding up into the mountains. It's not a straight shot, and it's tedious driving up into the Plumas. It's a beautiful drive when you see it, but once you think about it, it's like, man, we're still on this road? Damn.
Yeah. Well, and where do they end up? Like 40, 50 miles out of the way?
70. Yeah, that's a long trip. And where their car eventually gets stuck in the snow, it's not a paved road. Now it is. It's paved now, but at the time it was more of like a gravel road, and there's snow. And me being a Midwesterner, you living on the East Coast, we're used to snow. We're used to like when it's snowing, it's like, oh man, how they haven't plowed, but they get stuck in about 5 to 6 inches of snow, which is like, oh man, come on. But they're in the middle of nowhere. And where they are in the Plumas National Forest, it's near a place called Rogers Cow Camp. So you're about 4,200 feet in elevation. It's rugged territory, and their car's stuck. So Madruga had stopped at a gas station owned by Bill's parents before they went on their trip. And it's believed he filled the tank up to full. And what's important to know, the day before, they went to Sacramento on Thursday to do basketball practice last minute. And they went to a school they had not been to before, and they made it back. So how do these guys go to Sacramento, go to a school they don't know for a basketball practice? They drive to Chico and all of a sudden get lost. These guys have done, Sacramento's a big town. They don't have a problem there. But how all of a sudden Chico, a town they know, or at least Jack Madruga knows, they get lost. And you get lost up in the Plumas. It's not one wrong turn. You're driving for a long time. And once you hit Oroville, you're on the road for a good while. It's easy to get to Oroville, but it's like a long trip to get up to the Plumas where they got lost. And there's plenty of places to turn around. These guys, if they were like, where are we? Because if you see snow, that's like, oh, we're in the wrong place. There's pine trees. Oh, we're in the wrong spot. We got to get out of here. And the road is actually chained off at a point at that time because the snow was so bad. They're like, yeah, cars can't get through here. Even if you got all-wheel drive, you're going to have one heck of a time getting through the plumas. So how do you abandon your car in the middle of nowhere and disappear off the face of the earth? And that's what happens to these guys, because their parents back home are like, where are they? They're not home. And then the next morning, the parents are freaking out because they haven't heard from these guys. Because if they were running behind or anything was going wrong, someone would get on the phone and say, hey, we're running behind, or we're going to stop here and expect us home by this time. They were responsible. They knew that, hey, if we got to be home, someone's going to be worried about us. So there's no warning for the parents, like, hey, heads up, we're running late. So when the parents don't see them in the morning, they're like, what happened? They're super worried. They call the sheriff's department. Sheriff's department around 8 a.m. says, how old are these guys? And they say 24 to 32. Well, young guys like that, it's a Friday night. They probably went out and partied, and they drank too much and they're sleeping it off. And I don't think it was really, and I don't think it was really communicated, like their intellectual disability and maybe mental illness. And I think some of the family members were probably under the opinion, well, if they had a flat tire, if they broke down, they could have walked to a payphone. Because what these guys were known for doing around Yuba City and Marysville was walking places. Some of the guys could put in 5 to 10 mile walks if they didn't have a ride somewhere, or they could bicycle around town. And the parents probably knew, well, if there was a flat tire or if the car broke down, there's cities within walking distance. They call a tow truck, and maybe they forgot to call home, but nobody sees the car anywhere because the parents start driving the two highways, 70 and 99. Some even go up to Chico, like, have you seen these guys? Is anything going on? So from Saturday the 25th until Tuesday the 28th, about midday, there's no information on these guys. No car, no nothing. And then Tuesday night, the 28th, late, a guy who works up in the Plumas National Forest is watching the news, sees, he sees something about the missing men, or even hears about it on the radio, and it's like, wait a minute. When I was up there, I saw that Mercury Montego, and it was abandoned. So he calls law enforcement, and they all get up into the Plumas, and now they're like, how'd this car get up here? And there's nobody in the car. All the candy wrappers and the milk bottle, pop bottles back there too. I think it was like Pepsi. And they're like, nobody's in the car. And the car's left unlocked, which Jack Madruga did not like to do. And it's rumored that his window was kind of cracked, and he'd roll up the window when he left his car, because that's not the way he kept things. And also in the middle of winter, why would you leave your window down?
Yes.
I mean, that's just dumb. You're just, going to get snow and whatever in your car. So there's no sign of the guys. Now they're like, are they up here? Did someone drop this car off? Like, what do we got going on here? This is just mind bending. And they spent, March, probably through April, looking for the guys. By May, they're thinking like, I don't know what's going on. Man, and it was early June when they find Ted Weir's remains in a Forestry Service trailer about 12, 15 miles northeast of where they abandoned the car. And you're like, he was where? And like, after that, 3 others are found: Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, Jackie Hewitt, and they never find Gary Mathias. So Ted's the only one in the trailer, and the other 3 are near the trailer.
Let's back up a little bit, though. There's a couple of things I'd like to bring up. One, so when the police finally show up, or people start looking for them, we're like 5 days in, right? And I'm going to assume if it's continuing to snow, there's no tracks anymore. Now they don't know where these kids are. They believe that these men followed what a cat plow or something that had made a road, but again, there were no traces, nothing that they could find to follow. Correct?
Nothing in the paperwork that says there were tracks, but Jackie Hewitt's dad went up there to see what was going on. He said he claims he had passed away around 2018 and was interviewed, that he saw tracks, maybe 4 sets of tracks leaving the car going north.
Okay.
None of that's written down in the police file, because I've actually looked over the actual investigation files in person. So nothing says, oh, hey, there's tracks. Now, the night that they went missing on the 24th, and on the 28th, when the car was found, snow was minimal, if anything. There could have been rain, possibly, sleet, possibly, but then that weather machine kicks in once they need to find them, because now they get another weather system in there and it's dumping a lot of snow and makes their whole search efforts like just a pain.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, when they originally found the car, everybody couldn't quite believe that they couldn't have, with 5 men, that they couldn't have pushed it out of the little bit of snow that it was stuck in. Had they attempted to, had they given it a good try, they should have been able to free the car, correct?
Right. And I don't know what experience they had with being stuck in the snow. Like I said, I'm living in the Midwest. You're on the East Coast. You see someone stuck in the snow, you know what to do and what to tell them. Like, hey, do this, do that, you'll get out. But they didn't do it. And the interesting thing is, the road leading up to where they abandoned the car had some ruts, not perfectly paved, not perfectly smooth with the gravel. No damage to the undercarriage. It looked like the tires had been spinning, but there was a 1/4 tank of gas in the car. They had to hotwire it because the keys were missing. But when they fired up the car, it ran just fine, and it had 1/4 of a tank of gas. And there didn't appear to be any signs of trouble in the car, other than it's stuck in the snow, the wheels had been spinning, and that's it. And they left the car. And what they were trying to figure out is, why would you leave this car where you could just leave it running from time to time, having some heat, and maybe someone would come find you?
Yes.
But you're right. They lost, Friday night into Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So all those days that they've got nothing, although there's no snow, it's still, cold temperatures up there. And these guys were wearing jeans, light jackets, tennis shoes. None of these guys had winter hats, gloves, anything like that, snow pants, nothing. They're just dressed for what they thought would be a 50-degree night in Chico.
So right now, okay, we've reached to the point where these guys went to their trip. For whatever reason that is unbeknownst to anybody still today, took a wild trip on the way home, taking them 70 miles out of the way from where they should have been, okay, and are now lost. So here we'll take a break real quick, all right, and we'll come right back and continue with this god-awful story.
Yeah.
You are. Hey, how you doing? It's me again, another nobody, Travis Myers. And today we're going to talk whiskey. I know most of you think of me as an all-American patriotic type guy, and you are right. But when it comes to whiskey and drinking whiskey, which I do, I always go for the Irish stuff. And my choice when it comes to the Irish stuff is Powers Irish Whiskey. Established back in 1791. It's a triple distilled, oak-aged whiskey. Powers is simply magic. It also happens to be the #1 selling whiskey in Ireland, which has got to say something, because if it's good enough for the Irish, it's good enough for you. So the next time you raise a glass, fill it with Powers, and think of me, another nobody, Travis Myers. Hey there, true crime fans. Let me introduce you today to the Cold Case Initiative. The Cold Case Initiative is a foundation that donates money to smaller police agencies all over the country. It does this in order to offset the costs of scientific, forensic, and DNA testing, with the hope of solving cold case homicides and other horrific violent crimes that otherwise would remain unsolved. Please, if you have it in your heart and a little money to spare, go to www.coldcaseinitiative.org. Again, That's www.coldcaseinitiative.org, and lend a hand where it truly is needed. Be a part of solving a cold case. Every little bit helps. Know that 100% of the donations that go to the Cold Case Initiative go to agencies that are desperately in need of the help. So please, if you can, do the right thing and make a donation. Thanks, and all the best, my friends. All right, we're back. So we just left off. These 5 young men, all right, have abandoned their car for, again, another bizarro, unknown reason. Why would you leave your car in the freezing cold, 70 miles from where you're supposed to be, up the side of some mountain, in the snow? None of it makes sense. Not one bit of it makes sense.
No, not at all. Yeah, it's a question that people have been trying to answer since 1978. And they always say, if you're lost, stay put. Just stay put. Just don't go anywhere. But they did go somewhere. And instead of going down the road the way they came, they went up the road further into the snow, into the freezing cold. And at the time, the snow was pretty bad up that way. Some people said that the snow drifts were somewhere like 4 feet, 5 feet in spots, but then in really bad spots, it could be like 10 to 20 feet of snow drifts. Mm-hmm. And I'm used to snow, but when you get drifts that big and that much snow at once, it's overwhelming. And you had mentioned that a snowcat had been up that way, and it had cleared a path from that area to a place called the Daniels Inc. Campground, which was about 12 miles northeast of the car. But to go northeast, instead of traveling south, they went further into the Plumas and up higher in elevation, which, didn't make any sense. And we've tried to figure out why they left their car. And one theory is they could have been scared. They could have been threatened. And so all that's just speculation at this point, but it still adds fuel to the mystery of this case, which I still can't figure out.
That's something that again, I mean, everybody that reads these stories, looks at the story, the same thing, was it possible that somebody had scared them or frightened them from when they stopped at the convenience store to get their candy? Were they being followed? They felt like they were being followed, so they started to run from whoever they were running from. And then when they get up on the mountain, we have this very questionable character, as far as I'm concerned, this Mr. Joseph Shones. Am I getting his name right? Who says he witnessed them being there, but he didn't come forth immediately. He showed up, what, a week later? 5, 6, 8 days into the case?
It's about that. It's about that time frame. So Joseph Shones lived in the Plumas area in the town called Berry Creek. He had been at this place called the Mountain House, which was like a lodge with like a bar restaurant. He had some beers, and Mountain House was north of where he lived. And he drove north around 6 p.m. on Friday the 24th. And the lady who was working there serving him beer thought, why is he going north? He should be driving south, because if he goes north and his car gets in trouble, that's no man's land. Like, good luck with that. And that was the last time she saw him. So he claimed he drove north of Mountain House. Now, the reason he drove north is not clear. He claims that there were cabins he was checking on, which he didn't have a cabin to check on that way. He was just goofing around, which, why would you go off the beaten path, middle of nowhere, to goof around? And if he got stuck, which a lot of people said it was easy to do up there, you're kind of screwed. You're by yourself. And that's what happens. He was driving a VW Bug. He drove north, got stuck in the snow. He's like, well, I'll just push my car out. Pushes his car, has a heart attack, gets back in the car, and he claims around 11 p.m. midnight, the car that the guys are in, that Mercury Montego, pulls up behind him. The distance is, in his opinion, maybe a city block to a football field. So we're going, I don't know how long of a block he's thinking, to 100 yards. And he says one of a few things. First story, they get out of the car, they vanish into the wilderness. Another story, their car comes up with a pickup truck behind it, a red pickup truck. He sees the people get out of the car. He sees the people get out of the truck. It looks like a man and a woman holding a baby. And depending on the story he's telling the press, the guys go into the wilderness and the people get back into the truck, or they all get into the truck by getting into the bed of the truck and driving away. So he claims to have these visions of what happened that night. He also says that they walked up to his car and he scared them away, or they walked away, which is strange because he heard like whistling noises. He was uncertain because he said he had a heart attack. And for Shones around 3 a.m., 4 a.m., he gets out of the car and makes a walk back to that mountain house, which is 8 miles south of where his car was stuck. He finally shows up in Mountain House at 9 a.m., gets an aspirin and a glass of water, and asks for a ride home. He doesn't mention anything about seeing these guys and, getting their car abandoned. And from there, someone takes him home. He goes to a hospital. After his wife sees him, like, what happened to you? And he gets into the hospital and then claims he saw what happened that night. 2 different detectives interview him from the Yuba County Sheriff's Department. His stories are a bit off. Even he talks to the press, his stories are off. They're not consistent at all. And from there, that's basically it. They just interview him the 2 times. You got what he said to the press, roughly like March of 78. And then from there, he vanishes into history.
Yeah.
So I don't think they really knew what to think of him. When I talked to the surviving members of Yuba County, they just thought the guy was bogus.
Well, that's the way it strikes me is just, again, what do I know? I've just, read different things, seen different things, different YouTube shows on it or whatever, and doing my own research into this. And the whole Joseph Shones thing is, first of all, the guy's full of shit. All right. That's the bottom line there. All right. I think probably he's more than likely, all right, just a drunken loser who, for whatever reason, wanted to insert himself into the story because people are crazy and they do that. Okay. Okay, he may have been the person who scared these young men into the woods. It's 6 o'clock at night. He's leaving the bar, goes the wrong direction from home, ends up on the same road that these kids are on. Okay. Then has this mystical, unbelievable heart attack, but decides to hang out in his car for 5 hours. All right. When he happens to see the kids show up, again, still none of this is making sense. And then hangs out again until about 3 o'clock in the morning when he walks, after having a heart attack, walks 8 miles back to the bar that he got drunk in. The whole thing is just nonsensical.
Yeah, and one thing I've talked about with people who, have lived up there, I talked to his neighbor, and he said that the guy was a character. I mean, it was always something going on.
Yeah.
And I talked to another guy who lived up there very briefly, said the same thing. So they corroborated stories. And then, I've got Joe Shones' life in his police reports. And so, yeah, the guy was a character. But one thing we've tried to figure out is, like, how did this guy make it from point A to point B after having a heart attack? Did he have a heart attack? And if you're somewhere like that in the Plumas, he was in a VW Bug, and this has been debated by car experts. If he left the car idling, some VW people say, well, the car wouldn't have been blowing warm air. It would have been blowing lukewarm air because of the way that the engine was designed for the VW Bug. It was an air-cooled engine, according to them. So if the car is not in motion, it's really not going to blow warm air to keep you safe.
Interesting.
But other people said, well, no, I disagree. I had a VW Bug and I was warm in it if it was idling. nevertheless, I mean, if you're in your car, it's cold, you had a heart attack, you're not doing well, how do you not get hit with anything related to hypothermia? I mean, that's not in the medical report. It says he had a heart attack, but he wasn't treated for anything close to what be considered hypothermia. Because if he's up there 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. the next 6 p.m. to 9 a.m. the next day, that's like 15 hours you're exposed to the elements. Like, and when the guys went missing in the Plumas, law enforcement was like, "Oh, those guys' lives are now measured in minutes. They ran into the Plumas. They didn't have proper gear on. So how's Schoen surviving all this?"
It makes no sense. And then there's a simple thing when it comes to the truth anyway, and that is the truth doesn't change. If you know when somebody tells you the truth, their story remains consistent for the most part. 99% is going to stay the same. They might say, "Oh, I forgot that," but overall, it sticks, because it's the truth. When a guy makes up a story, that's when it starts to flip-flop and go in different directions because he tries to make the story better,
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, again, from everything I've seen, I think our Joseph Schoen is a liar.
Yeah, and nothing makes sense. And with him being on that road, someone could say, well, he's allowed to be up there. But if you live somewhere like the Plumas and you drive to the middle of nowhere and the roads aren't paved or plowed properly, and you run the risk of getting stuck and you're a man alone up there, or I don't care what your skills are, you're doomed. And you better hope and pray.
He's from the area, so he's wise to this.
Yeah. And and I talked to people who lived up there, and the one guy said, when you pass the way that those guys, the 5 did and Schoen's did, you're up in what they call no man's land, because if you're more south of there, you're going to see more people. But the further up you go, it's just you and nature. And so this one guy said, that's no man's land up there. And the terrain is rough. It's not like I'm walking into the woods, having a good time. I mean, the terrain changes. And Schoen's, by all accounts, and I even spoke to his daughter, and he wasn't a mountain man. He wasn't the outdoors type. Mm-hmm. He did not like it. And so this guy gets lost. Like, how does this go down? And one person said it best: the worst thing that could happen to those guys is having Schoen's being the last person on earth to see him, because he's not going to tell the truth, and whatever really happened, we'll never know, because Schoen's passed away like well over 10 years ago.
Yeah. Let me ask you this on that same situation here. Is there any proof that Schoen's and his car were there?
Yes.
There is. Okay, so he was physically there. That part is not incorrect.
The car was there. A guy who lived up in the area, a few people who were up in that area saw the car, because around that area, people would do a lot of snow activities. They'd go sledding or tubing or whatever. And I've talked to some people who lived up that way, and they said, yeah, you could go up that way if it's snow, and you could just ride like a tube down the road and no one would be in your way, or you just go out and just have fun up in the mountains. But people said they saw his car and someone saw the Montego behind it, and no one was with the car. Now, people were at that mountain house, saw Schoen's walk in and order like some aspirin and a glass of water and make no mention of the guys who went missing. Mm-hmm. So there was probably 4 or 5 people in that bar who saw him and, told the same story to law enforcement. He came in, he did this, they sent him home. Someone drove him home. And people did see the car. His wife went up to get it with a couple other people. It was gone. And we know the car was up there first. So someone just wouldn't drive that car up there and abandon it. But, Schoen's story's there with that, but whatever else happened, we'll never know.
And now the other part too, from what I've both read and watched, there were several sightings of a red pickup truck, but none that we can confirm were actually on that mountain.
Correct. So Shones thought there was a pickup truck behind the Montego. And then probably around the week after the men went missing, a lady claimed to have made contact with the men in a town probably 50 miles south of where they abandoned the car. 3 of them were in a red pickup truck, but 2 of them were inside this like general store, and they weren't wearing the same clothes, and the people in the truck weren't, it wouldn't make sense for them to be in the truck, and the guys in the general store, everything was off with their story.
Right.
It was total BS. And we think because with Shones' story and this lady's story, money was offered at the time. And I think in today's world, they were offering like 10 to 12 grand. And if you're kind of hard on your luck and you kind of need some money, like 10 grand, 12 grand, that's, hey, no one's going to complain. And I think at the time, people probably thought I could use that money because the reward that was set up, it was worded, hey, if you could tell us what happened, if you've got any information that will help the case, you'll get the money. So Shones was probably like, ooh, I could use that money. And the lady who claimed to have seen him at a general store 50 miles south, ooh, I could use that money too, as long as I tell the story.
Yeah, well, when the money shows up, the witnesses come out of the woodwork, all kind of opportunists there.
Yeah, and like Sacramento, their newspaper offered like an additional $5 grand. And anyone who saw someone who they thought had a disability or didn't look right, they would say, oh, I saw him at a bowling alley, at the airport. A girl even claimed that she was a student at USC all the way down in LA, 8 hours away. I saw him on a bus driving around LA. Like, what are you talking about? So you bring that money into play, everybody's got a story. Absolutely. And it just pushes law enforcement out to these, on these wild goose chases where they've got to like put everything down and, chase these stories that are just complete BS. And that's just a huge problem in this case.
Well, and that's something that people don't realize. It's something that you have to do because God forbid you don't. And it turns out that there's a lead there. So you got to follow every lead. And the next thing you know, you're going in 20 different directions instead of the one that you should be doing. And in this case, it should have really stuck right there within that, 15, 20 mile circle of where their car was.
Yeah. And they even, the whole issue here was where the car was abandoned is another county. So you're in another jurisdiction. And then where they lived, some guys were in one jurisdiction, one guy was in another jurisdiction. So now you got 3 jurisdictions. And then there's a neighboring county. So now you got 4 jurisdictions. Then the state comes in. Now you got 5. It's like all these cooks are in the kitchen.
And it's like
no one's
like
talking.
Some sort of parks department or something there also, isn't there?
Yeah, the Forestry Service does stuff up in the Plumas. But I talked to someone who worked for him, and their opinion or their statement was when someone gets lost or something goes down like this, we step back and let law enforcement do their thing. So we're not going to, stand in their way. If they need help, we'll give them help, but they lead the investigation and they kind of say like, we don't really get involved, but whatever's needed will help. But that's interesting in itself where there's really no records from the Forestry Service in with this case. And so it's like, okay, what did they know? And it's just more of this case where it's a lot of he said, she said kind of stuff and a lot of finger pointing and, like not everyone's talking to each other and getting along. It's really wild.
Yeah. So here now we're in this spot. Okay. Again, with the car, with Shones, with all this nonsense going on, and basically nothing happens for, 4+ months before we have a couple of motorcycle guys, a group of motorcyclists ripping through the woods up there. And please, take us to what happens next.
So it's early June, 1978, like 4 months later, and some guys are out doing like a Sunday ride on their motorcycles. And they didn't know how bad the weather had been through the winter into the spring because they thought they could do a simple trip. But with trees down and still like snow in the road and some spots being worse than others, their whole trip just got thrown out of whack. So they were trying to figure out the way home.
So as high as we are, not to interrupt you, but as high as we are with that elevation, there's still snow on the ground in June.
In some spots, yeah, not a lot, but some. And they just decided we'll just take a ride up here, check some spots out. The roads aren't great, trees are down. The whole trip is just not what they expected. One guy said, "Hey, how do we get back to where we want to be?" Another guy chimed in and said, "Well, there's the Daniels Inc. campground. They got a map there, the Plumas. Let's go there. We'll look at the map. We'll figure out how to get home, and we'll call it a day." When they go back to the Daniels Inc. campground, they had been by there earlier, but not really stopped and, looked around. But when they got back, they noticed there's a smell. And they traced the smell to these Forest Service trailers that are up there. They just use, if there's like fires going on or service needs to be at people, loggers or anything needs to be up there for an extended period of time, they got these trailers to stay in. They go up to the trailer, they see a window's broken. One person peeks inside and notices there's a dead body. Now they've got to go somewhere and call law enforcement and say, "We found a dead body up in this trailer." They're not taken seriously at first, but by being a little bit persistent, they say, "You got to come up here. You got to take a look at this. There's a dead body." And when law enforcement gets up, they examine the trailer. There's a guy in a bed in one of the bunks, and he's been wrapped up, and he's kind of got like his arms across his chest. And judging by the clothes and some personal belongings, it's Ted Weir, who's a member of the group. So now they've got the first member of the group found. And so that was about June 4th of 78, or June 4th, 6th, around there. As the days go by, they soon find the remains of Jack Matruga and Bill Sterling. They're a few miles down the road from the trailer. They're kind of separated like by a road where the remains are found, and the remains have been scattered, unfortunately. And a few days after that, they find Jack Hewitt. He's a little bit more north of where Jack and Bill were found, and all that's left are just a few remains of his and not much. So you've got one guy who's found in the trailer, and Ted.
Now, and with him, this is Teddy Weir, right? Ted Weir, who's found in the trailer. And you say he's wrapped up in, well, you just say he was wrapped up, but from what I understand, he was quite tightly wrapped, right? And in like 7 or 8 sheets and blankets, whatever it was, quite a bit. Something that he probably could not have done himself, correct?
No, they said that he was kind of like military tucked in.
Right.
And
then there was a situation there too, when they found the body, with the shoes.
Yep. Gary Mathias's shoes were found in the trailer. Ted Weir's shoes were not in the trailer, but Ted's feet were badly frostbitten. Plus, they noticed some blood poisoning in his legs, bad frostbite, gangrene, whatever. And his cause of death was called pulmonary edema, where fluid builds up in your lungs.
Mm-hmm.
And he died a terrible death. Plus, he starved to death because he lost 100 pounds. He was 200 pounds when he went missing. He's down to about 100.
But here's the craziest, again, the thing that makes me so crazy about this, okay? We have five men. We know 2 for a fact made it to the trailer, possibly 3, possibly all 5, right? Because again, everybody has their own theory on this. So possibly all 5, all right? But they never turned the gas on to start the heat, okay? From what I understand, and I've heard different reports that there were anywhere from 30 to 70 different cans of food that have been opened, because there was a whole storehouse full of food. They could have lasted these 5 guys up to a year. Am I correct so far?
Yep. So there was propane that you could turn on to heat the trailer. Now, the question is, did they know how to turn it on and heat the trailer? Because there's a whole process you have to go through.
No, I can understand that.
Did they understand how it works? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know if I could if you had it all set up and you
Mhm.
didn't give me any instructions, I mean, I'd do my best to turn it on, but I mean, I don't know how to run propane in a trailer. There were sea ration cans, which are these military, meals that you can get. There was dried food up there they could have eaten, but they did open the sea ration cans, and you needed P38 or P36 can opener to get them open.
Yeah,
But
P38. It's a little thing you
yeah,
hang on your dog tags.
yeah, and I think they tried it once, and then they found the old what were they called? The church keys, where you used to pop open your beer, open your high C cans.
Sure.
They just kind of meticulously went around the can with that and opened food. So there's about 30 cans open. Gary's shoes are in there. Jackie Hewitt's dad claims he saw something in the trailer with handwriting on it that matched his son's handwriting. So there's people in that trailer with Ted. Someone tried lighting a candle. And everyone's like, how long were these guys here? Like, how'd they get here? First of all, to get from the car to the trailer, that's not an easy walk. They couldn't walk across the land because the terrain is too rugged, and it would have been hell on them. Because if they went from here to here over the land, it's 5 miles, but it's rough. You have to be like an expert to get there. But if they followed the road that the snowcat may have followed, it kind of cuts through the land, but that goes 12 miles. So they say if they saw the snowcat track or trail, they may have followed that, thinking that's like the around the bend theory, like, oh, we'll find help around the bend. And they get into the trailer, and from there, it's just anyone's guess what happened in that trailer. It's really, really weird. It's super frustrating because everyone started to wonder, okay, if the car's down here and they're found up here, why didn't anyone go to the trailers up here? And there was like, oh, we never knew about the trailers. And then the Forestry Service went, yeah, we told you about those trailers and you just ignored us. And that's still an unanswered question today, why no one checked. And there was probably thoughts, well, it's to the northeast and you'd walk down the road, and that wouldn't have made any sense to walk northeast. And well, these guys had disabilities and they probably weren't that smart. And we don't think they could have made their way to the trailers. There's like all these excuses. And in the newspaper, it sounds like, well, we had helicopter out. We had people checking all over the place at other cabins. Why weren't these checked? So there's a lot of unanswered questions to this day about why they never made it to that cabin or to that set of trailers where they found Ted Weir. And then the other bodies were anywhere from 1 mile to 3 miles, like south of the trailer. And they found like blankets and boots and stuff outside the trailer areas. Someone must have put that out. They never find Gary Mathias. They're just like, man, what happened? And where's Gary? Gary's never been found to this day. And, in my opinion, he died in the Plumas National Forest in 1978. And
Well, that's the thing when people like to say that, well, he hasn't been found. Finding people can be very difficult. And in fact, I'm sorry, I forgot his name. Is it Jackie Hewitt, who his father found a piece of his spine? What a god awful thing! Imagine that his father found it. But then his skull, if I'm not mistaken, was found. I don't know if it's 300 feet or 300 yards away. I'm going to assume 300 feet away from where his spine was found. So, in a matter of the 3 or 4 months that before the discovery of the body, before they went missing and the discovery of the body, animals could have took those bodies all over the place. I mean, under leaves, ravines, rocks, just all over the place, beat up, chewed up, torn apart between the animals, the insects, whatever got to them in that amount of time. It's very, very, and people go missing all the time. And that's why they're just never found,
yeah,
And
and it's frustrating because they figured, well, we can find Gary if we've got the spots of these other 3 south of the trailer. We can kind of map it out and find Gary. And by June 19th, June 20th, they basically said, oh, we're done. Let's call it a day. And that was it. I mean, like June 20th of 1978 is the end of the case. And they even went to the Air Force. There was a Air Force base not too far from where the guys lived. And they asked, could you take a plane up and do like aerial surveillance? And the plane said, we could, but it's not going to get you what you want out of this case. We can't pinpoint a body like that. Yes. And you don't have the money to pay for it. And it just being, just for show and a waste of time. So to this day, I mean, Gary's never been found. It's a huge mystery to this day. I mean, we're just not sure what happened to Gary, who all made it to the trailer, and with only minimal remains of Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, and Jackie Hewitt, the theory is, well, they died of exposure, hypothermia, but we don't know what really happens because there's only so much that the coroner's office could work with.
Right.
With Ted, they knew it was pulmonary edema, and he had, the frostbite and the gangrene going with the blood poisoning.
And from what I understand too, between the coroner was able to determine he lived for 12 to 13 weeks past his disappearance date.
Yeah, they had it somewhere around like 8 to 13 weeks. They weren't 100% certain. People still talk about, well, how did he live so long? He didn't eat, and how'd they get water? Because there's not like a water hookup up there.
Oh, it's plenty of snow.
Yeah, and that's what they probably assume. That's what they assume. They either melted snow or ate the snow, which, I mean, you got to do what you got to do to survive. But what's super frustrating about the whole thing and everything with that trailer is nothing's really left. The trailers are gone.
Yes.
And any evidence in there, I think it no longer exists. Even the car, it's all gone. So
there's no way to do any DNA. I mean, back then there was no DNA at the time. That technology didn't exist. But now we still can't. And granted, there's nothing we could do. These men are long gone, of course. But there's nothing we can do to figure it out through any DNA testing because it's all gone.
Yeah, I mean, there's no GPS. I mean, no DNA we can use. Nothing. I mean, they tried getting fingerprints off the C ration cans, but that turned out to be, it just didn't work out. It turned out to be a failure. They couldn't get any latent prints off of that. They even had like some boxes up there and some other items, but no fingerprints. And it's like, okay, what's going on up there? Like, how did this happen? And one of the victims' relatives was up there and said everybody was walking through the trailer. So you have this scene that should be blocked off, and everyone's just kind of walking through, kind of doing their own thing. And she's like, why isn't this blocked off? Like, why aren't they looking for stuff? And so,
well, I can speculate that whoever the investigating officers were, it was, a closed case. They didn't consider any foul play, right? Although the foul play that may have happened would have been back on the road, they didn't suspect any foul play amongst the friends. They died in the elements. Case closed. Boom, done deal.
And still is today. Like, hey, the car got lost. They got lost. They got out of the car. They died. The end.
Yes.
But when you talk about the people or the five guys, the case itself, everyone goes back to, okay, how do you get to that point where you abandon the car? Because that's a long drive. And what gets you to that point when all you have to do is just get back on the highway home? And why are you just endlessly driving to the middle of nowhere? So there's all of these questions, and really we don't have anything to use as evidence today to say, well, if we only could get this tested, or if we can only, get some, prints off of this or that, or, is there any blood stains? There's no blood stains. There's like maps that they had in the car that survived to this day. And if there's anything else, it's really few and far between.
And again, case-wise, and not to belittle it at all, it's not, to me, it's not a matter of what happened, how it happened. This we understand. They died of exposure. They died of starvation. They died from being out there. The why is the question to me. What in the world brought them there to begin with? you know? And
That's the $1 million question.
yeah, and that's why it'll forever be a mystery because we'd never be able to prove otherwise. Now, again, I have you, and the reason I have you here is as the foremost authority on this case, if I will. All right. What do you think? Again, I know it can only be a theory, but what is your theory on what happened on this?
I think they went to Oroville for a reason. Maybe someone had to use the restroom, or someone may not have liked, oh, we went to that convenience store and we got chips and candy bars. I want something else to eat. That's not, maybe they stopped to get a burger. Maybe they stopped to use the restroom. Maybe someone's like, can I use the payphone or get cigarettes? So I think there's a reason to get into Oroville. And once they got there, I believe they ran into someone they knew or someone who was just looking for trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was someone they knew, there was just some unfinished business between one of the guys or all of the guys and this individual or people. And it just went down from there. Or maybe some drunk guy and his friends saw the guys and maybe noticed, their intellectual disabilities. Something went down from there. And then whatever started in Oroville made its way out to the Plumas, where the guys were trying to get away from a problem, and the problem kept following. It was like what we call clear and present danger, where they knew that going a certain way wasn't going to work, that there had to be a way around, whatever it is they're dealing with. Because why would you just drive all the way up to the middle of nowhere and get out of the car to meet your demise? None of this makes any sense. But I think something happened. They had to go to Oroville for a reason, because you just don't drive through Oroville on the highway. You have to exit the highway to get into the town. Mm-hmm. You have to get onto the road to take you to the Plumas. So you have to follow all these steps. Well, what happened? And people are like, oh, they missed the exit, or they didn't realize where they were going. I don't believe that.
No, I don't buy that.
That's BS.
I don't buy that either. And your theory does make sense to me, because it's plausible. It's completely plausible. They could pull off for some fast food, for whatever, and it's on the map, even if it's a little off the map. Yeah, we'll pull over here. Hey, there's a little town here. They're going to have something. I can see this all happening, right? And then once they get there, they run into a couple of bullies, or as you say, possibly somebody that knew them from their past somehow, and they decide to run from them, and they're running blindly. Literally blindly. They're just running.
Yeah, and it's like something had to go down, and they probably realized they didn't want any part of it. Whatever it was, whatever was happening, it was a situation where they knew they just had to get away and maybe find some kind of help. Because I just don't see these guys, because there's homes off the road in the Plumas where they could have even stopped and knocked on the door and said, hey, we're lost.
Sure.
Or they could have just turned around. And knowing what these guys knew, especially Jack Madruga, the driver, he knew where he was. And something was going down. And even law enforcement said, well, they knew, Gary Mathias knew some people in a town called Forbes-town, which is, if you go through Oroville and make a little bit of a long drive past that, you get there. But again, why make that drive and put an additional 40 to 50 minutes one way and put that time coming back on top of getting back on the highway and getting home? That doesn't make sense again. So why put 80 to 100 extra minutes of a trip just driving, not adding anything like meeting these people or doing whatever it is you need to do? So why have all this extra time ruining your night and making it more difficult to get back home? And like I said, we have all these theories. It's hard to get a solid theory at this point, because all we're doing is working with, speculation and what ifs. And even talking to the families, you get a feeling that this is out of character. This is just not them. This is not the way they did things when they were hanging out together.
Well, that's the real feeling that I got. Yeah. And now, yeah. So pretty much, again, we're at the end of the story because there never was really an end to this story.
Still today, we're getting close to the 50th anniversary.
Yeah.
In 2028. No stories or no updates, no leads, no nothing. And I do my best to stay in touch with the families and with law enforcement who now have it as a cold case, but nothing.
Well, we'll get back to your book, okay? Let me show everybody again. If you have any interest in this case, please check out Tony's book, all right? But something that I liked about this is, well, what do I want to say? You didn't so much tell the story as you did all the interviews, and the interviews tell the story. And I actually appreciate that. I could, it doesn't sing like a narrative where you go through it because you're not telling a story, but it comes out through all of your interviews. Basically, it's an investigation, and you show your investigation as you go through. Something that I appreciate and I liked very much. Tell us just a little bit about writing the book, if you like.
Oh yeah, I mean, when I had the idea for the book, there had to be a roadmap from getting from page 1 to page whatever, and I said, well, let's dedicate a chapter to each of the 5, the day they got lost, the investigation, and like some conclusions. And as the book was building, there's things I threw in there. Like, this is what you need to know about the Plumas and the sheriff's department, and like the Gateway Project where they were involved, which had a lot of suspicious stuff going on there. So with the 5, I just got to meet all but one of their families. Bill Sterling's family's been out of the spotlight for a long time, which I understand. And they've been consistent since 1978. So no issues there. But in talking to the families, you got a bigger picture of, who these guys were and how they knew each other and some of the adventures they went on. So in telling their story first was important because sometimes you read a true crime book and it's like, bam, we're right in the case. Yeah. And it's like, okay, that's cool though, but I'm interested in this case, but who are these victims and what was their story and what, there's more to this than bam, we're right in the middle of the case. And I kind of wanted to build this up to the night they went missing because you kind of wanted to be invested in all these people.
Well, actually, for me, that is something that I very much appreciated because it attaches you to these men. You now have a feeling who they are. You know who they are as individuals, and it makes it that much more heartbreaking because people fail to realize that, and they do that through everything. I've said this a million times, and I'm going to be boring for my listeners. You ask any true crime fan, they can name you a dozen serial killers, right? But they can never name a victim. And that's the thing that always kills me. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're absolutely right. And that was the point to this, because I'll read true crime and some people just jump into the case. They throw 1,000 names at you over like 10 pages. And you just become like, okay, who is this again? Like, where are we going? So I thought we really got to build this, the story of who these 5 were, how they met, who are they as people, going through their Gateway Project experience, talking a little bit about their community, even talking a little bit about the investigators who, would be assigned to the case, and then put everything together. So the day they went missing, the investigation, the aftermath, the legacy, and get all these people involved from start to finish and say, this is where it began and this is where we are. And the story's not over. To this, with the Yuba County 5, there's really no end of the story here. Gary Mathias is still missing. There's still interest in the case from people who do, like read true crime or look into unsolved mysteries and the unexplained. And it's nice to know there's people all around the world talking about the case that are interested in the case and want to see the case solved. But with all these mysteries, involved, I tried to throw everything I could into the book because sometimes people may read a book and go, oh, well, what about this or what about that? And people have done that. They brought up new ideas to me and I thought, wow, I never really thought about that. could this have happened? Could, what about this information, that information, this type of theory? And people do bring up good points, and it's nice to connect with them and, have a little bit of a brain trust here to work with, and have people who say, well, I used to live in the Plumas, or I worked in the Forestry Service, or I did this and I did that, and I've worked with people with disabilities, and I have family with schizophrenia, and things like that. And you get all this information coming in. It's like, okay, they're solidifying some things that I've thought about, but they're also bringing in some new perspectives and theories. And it's what's needed for the case, because the more we talk about it, the more we get people involved who can bring in whatever they bring in from their own life experience, knowledge that they have from having different types of careers. Like, I feel like one day we could sort of like complete this story, but we're not there yet. And I wish it was sooner than later, because I feel like this is just one of those stories that's just going to continue for a long time.
Well, I personally, I'm sad to admit, I don't think we'll ever be able to know, So
I try to be hopeful, try to be optimistic, but some days I just feel like, how much longer is this going to be? And, how many more people are going to talk about this case over the next like 5-10 years? Cause I'm, thinking, when 2028 comes up, that'll be 50th anniversary of the case. And I'm thinking, oh boy, I don't want to, I don't know what to think about, when we get to that point. But some of these cases, that people talk about and I've read about, families go through, not knowing anything for a very long time.
Oh, yeah.
It would be nice. I think the best thing to happen out of this case at this point is the remains of Gary Mathias are found.
Sure.
The big issue that they've got right now is the wildfires that have happened over the past, 8 years have done a significant damage. And it's hard to tell if they'll find anything or if anything can happen. Some people are hopeful, some people are skeptical, but I'm one of the hopeful people.
Yeah. Yeah, you never know. Some hiker might come across some teeth one day, something like that, And
anything. He was wearing glasses at the time, and people were saying like bears won't eat the frames of glasses, or animals would avoid that. So we would hope that someone may find the frames or something and just say, hey, we've got this. Is this, linked to Gary? And the Yuba County Sheriff's Office has, obtained DNA from his relatives to match him up with any, John Doe discoveries that have been made in the Plumas before. They picked up the DNA and try matching it with any of those bodies that may have been found in the Plumas, and try to get a link and say, hey, this actually was Gary, but no reports there, and no information to share, unfortunately. It'd be nice, but again, it's wishful thinking.
Wishful thinking. Exactly. Well, on that note, my friend, I think we'll say goodbye. All right. I'm so glad you came to sit with me today. I'm so glad you wrote this book too. It really is an interesting read. And I really appreciate all the investigative work and all the interviews you did to put it together.
Yeah, thank you. And it's available at Amazon. You can get it on a Kindle version or paperback, and at Genius Book Publishing, or you can get it at Barnes & Noble. So it's great talking to you.
Yes, sir. I do appreciate it. And I hope to see you again at CrimeCon.
Yeah, I'm hoping. It's Denver this year, and that's a great city. It's been a while since I've been there, so I'm hoping to get there.
All right. Very good. All the best, my friend.
Thank you.
All right. There you go. Crazy, crazy story. A mystery, I'm sorry to say, we'll probably never, ever get to the bottom of. Again, if you want to know more or take a deeper dive, pick this up. Things Aren't Right by Tony Wright. Okay? Much more detail than we can go in here on this show. And until next time, my friends, thank you so much for watching. Now, please, do the right thing. Do the right thing. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. And we will see you again next week. All the best, my friends. Listen up. This one's important. I'd like to try to encourage you, please, to give to the Stephen Siller Foundation, Tunnel to Towers. at T2T.org. That's letter T, number 2, letter T.org. Do good for those who've done good for you.